Hello, and welcome to another wonderful episode of Submitted for Your Approval, the weekly card review show for Collective, the community-created card game where you make the cards and I do the finger guns. I'm Stranger Side, your community ambassador and host for the show. I am joined today by my faithful co-host, Grief.
Howdy, folks. I'm not drunk enough to do this episode.
You need like a throne so you could do the Castlevania Dracula thing and do the, like, throw it into the fireplace or whatever. And I am also joined today by a special guest, a new guest who's never appeared on the show. We're joined by TheFirstGokun, or Gokers10, depending on how you know
him. Hi, it's me. I'm here.
He's the realm admin for a bunch of different stuff. Well, realm creator for a bunch, and then realm admin for one, because that's still a rule, I guess. I'm going to jump straight into it, starting with the accepted submissions. These cards got in last week. Starting with one that is near and dear to my heart, Mist Fist is a 5-drop mind organization from Black Rift with create 3 random 1-cost units and give them Harmonize. So it's obvious that I'm excited about this thing. This plays into Harmonize, which is my proud custom created keyword. This plays into my realm, but it's also Puapka doing it. Now, Puapka, for those of you who don't know, has a known disdain for my realm, and I'm interested to see this new thing developing. So Spikebird is now trying to see the 1-cost units become an archetype to their own, and I think that could be cool. It veers off a little bit from my original strict mechanical definition for Black Rift, but it might be worth exploring, so I want to see where it goes. So yeah, art's beautiful, card's beautiful. I like that it's mind. It actually plays into a lot of my expectations about where Black Rift is maybe going in the card pool. Because it seems to be going probably toward Ashgurdy, but we'll see. Grief, what do you think about this?
It's a pretty good card, and well, on base value, it actually creates 3 units, basically 3 1-cost vanillas, because they are all 2/2s thanks to Harmonize. Then, on top of that, you have to consider, oh yeah, these are pre-existing 1-drops, which get a Harmonize keyword, getting the 2/2 plus stat points, and do whatever they're actually doing. If there are summon units, well, okay, you have stronger vanillas. If they have an entrance effect, you're getting extra value for cost. And if there's something in between, as long as you're not hitting like a weird chicken and legacy that basically cannot attack or do anything and does nothing for your deck, then okay, you've basically missed out on something, but you still have a body that you can, well, throw in front of an attacker or what. Still has 2+ attack.
Yeah. This does definitely give you a lot of value when it comes down, and it can play into Harmonize synergies. It encourages people to read the text on Harmonize, which a lot of people miss, that it only really cares about having the ability. The tribe is like a secondary thing, depending on how you're doing it. And I'd be interested in seeing how this helps non-natives and how this could possibly help make Harmonize.deck a thing. Because it just being a +3 to Harmonizers, if you got a Harmonizer out, could be really cool. Gokun, what do you think of this?
Well, to speak to what Reva said, like, I don't generally think in the competitive space, but I do have to acknowledge that this card is, I would actually say, slightly over curve with how strong it is. It's hard to measure it exactly, but
well, yeah, because it can low roll or high roll, and it's very card pool dependent.
Yeah, here's my reasoning. Two 1-cost units, because of the way our stat lines curve out, 2 1-cost units always have more stats when put together than a sort of generic 2-cost unit. So with the way that scales, you're getting a little bit more, or even a lot more than 3 stat points of value for what on the base, and then you're getting that Harmonize boost, which is +2 to everything, and then you're getting, well, whatever you get from synergies, which is obviously just beautiful gravy. Like, this is a fun card, and maybe a strong card that I could see maybe eventually at some point going up to 6 with my classic overestimation of card strength.
Well, yeah, we'll have to see where it's at, because I know a lot of people overvalue Harmonize because it does have that thing where it depends on things sticking. And so it's it's a tower of cards where it looks very formidable, very impressive, but one pull in the wrong spot can cause the whole thing to topple.
For sure.
So yeah, I'm going to jump over to the next card. The Megaflora Stomper is a 15 cost neutral 9/9 giant plant dinosaur elemental from Unguya, which this costs 1 less for each point of HP you have over 25. We talked about this a little last week. I swear, one of these days we need to get something that cares about something having exactly 4 tribes, because we have so many cards that do that, and I just want something to care about it mechanically.
I mean, maybe one day we'll get a zoo archetype that cares about a lot of different tribes.
Yeah, or we could see some of that. What do you think?
We've already got the start of that. We've already got the start of that with Huntress.
Yeah,
that's true. To tell the truth, I looked at the weekly cards that I got in and was kind of bored. I took the least offensive option to talk about. This card is cute. I like that it has 4 tribes, which is basically the best aspect about that card. Sure, it's basically a Stomper like Swamp Stomper, etc., which has a huge cost attached to it and a clause that allows it to get cheaper. In the past, this would have easily hit like, well, -20 on turn 3. Talking about like 2 years ago. I don't really have too much of an insight on standard as a format, so I don't really know how impactful Megaflora Stomper would be currently. But yeah, this is like a very cute little clause to actually get a cost reduction onto. But from all the Stompers, even compared to Coil, this is like the weakest giant of them all.
Yeah, I do like that it gives you an incentive to gain HP because HP doesn't really gaining HP doesn't necessarily win you the game. And so I think it's cute for that aspect. I'm just really glad to see this DR art in because I think it's really, really nifty.
That's true.
Gokun, what do you think?
Yeah, this DR art's been floating around for a while. I think I'm with Grief on the cuteness of this card. As far as straightforward card design goes, this is very dead unless you can really hold your own against any sort of aggressive or mid-rangey deck that's not wasting its time gaining life. But it's sort of win more, but I do still enjoy that element of it that says if you have gained a bunch of life, you can drop this on the board and try to start ending the game. Like, it translates life into something that actually wins. So it is nice.
Yeah,
I'm a fan of this, although I am expecting potentially there was a rework idea on the Discord about making it cost less every time you gain life. So it sort of ticks down slowly instead of being as polarizing, but
I'd like to see it actually being played first before we go to anything like that.
Yeah.
The thing is, I mean, if we're talking about instances of gaining life and not amounts of gaining life, then this makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, there could be a buff is the thing. Because then you get stuff like Pomegranate where, you have your Pomegranate going off. Sure, I'm going to gain 1 life 8 times.
But at least that's easier to achieve than trying to plaster potential 5-drop in turns 7 to 10 on the board and saying, okay, here is my 5-drop 9/9 or best case 3-drop 9/9, which get nuked out of orbit.
Yeah.
The moment you pass priority.
Yeah, that's sort of the problem it runs into. Is at the very end of the day, it's just vanilla. Grave Uprising is a 5-drop spirit action from nowhere in particular with return any number of undead from your graveyard to play with total mana cost equal to or less than your max mana. So this has wonderful art by Go Chris, and I like Reanimator. I'm very excited to see more Reanimator and Reanimator that has a pretty nice, pretty fair, I'd agree, condition. It only hits undead, but you can't cheat anything out in excess of your current mana pool. But besides that, it could be a potent tool, and I could definitely see this seeing play. Especially with, and this is a Gokun card, the Grave Worms and other shenanigans. What do you think of this, Gokun?
Oh yeah, grave worms, all that stuff. I do enjoy this card as kind of a quote unquote fixed raised dead. It sort of gets more at the essence of what raised dead was probably trying to do initially, which is summon total 5 mana. And this thing scales nicely as the bonus for sticking with that undead tribal. The reason I actually picked this card, and this is not just because I am a narcissist and want people to see my art. I wanted to draw attention to something, which is that if you pick the wrong sort of combination of cards and you pick more than your max mana, this card just doesn't do anything. And I want to sort of put that out there as like a design challenge to designers, that we should be using loops, for example, to repeat the choose prompt until like a player finds a combination of mana costs that works. Like I think it's important to design cards that are forgiving to people who like make little math mistakes or like misread the card or misread what their max mana is at the time they play it.
Yeah, well, that lets you play around with, well, of course, you do have to give them a limited number of tries. That does give you interesting stuff. We have that problem with like lesser rays. We have stuff like that. I personally, and I'm saying this as someone who, you know, might be able to help influence people who can maybe change this. I do think eventually we should consider having choose windows be smarter, but that of course is a matter of back-end development, which is a matter of cash flow and stuff like that. But I could definitely see your argument that we should be more considerate about these things. Grief, what do you think of this?
I like mass absolute return, so why not? Thing is, you have more potential for it if you are playing it later down the line, considering that it allows you to raise more units for raise more units for a lower cost investment compared to other options. Problem is though, if you cheat it out earlier, which is possible if you hard cast it outside of or free cast it through other different means, the return is pretty much diminishing by that amount due to the fact that if you're cheating it out for 3 mana, you only get units up to 3 mana in cost. So this goes a little bit against what hardcore competitive reanimation decks want to do, because they want to cheat out the most bang for the buck as early as possible. This is an extremely strong mass return or mass reanimation effect, but only actually is worth the value later down the game. Later in the game,
it's very fair, which I kind of like. And I mean, we're so mad. I don't know why the community hates reanimators so much, but I think that it's very fair, and it's good we have stuff like this around. I guess I'd rather have this than nothing.
I mean, taking the cross section regarding the age of our community, not many of them have died to Grizzle brands that often in their life. That's such a hatred against reanimation is justified.
Oh, and a final note about this card should probably call out is that the art depicts Ethera, which is Bonk's character from I think, oh gosh, like first season, right?
Yeah,
like a really long time ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Back when.
Now we're gonna start jumping into the active submissions. These are cards that are on the subreddit for you to vote on now. Starting with the Good Doctor is a 1-drop Spirit 0/2 Scientist Shapeshifter from Duskmere. With Slay, transform this, and active, deal 1 damage to a unit, its owner draws a card. It transforms into the Galthmore Beast, which is a 2-drop Spirit 3/2 Wolf Shapeshifter with Agile. Somebody on the Discord was going around comparing this to Delver, And I think that was sort of an interesting comparison. And this is the first art that we're going to talk about today. We have several that was made with VQGAN. So VQGAN, for those of you who don't know, is an artificial intelligence using what's called a generative adversarial network. I might actually do an episode going into this because for once in my life, here on Submitted, there's a topic that I'm actually qualified to talk about. I am an artificial intelligence researcher. That is my job. So yeah, nobody actually drew this. I'm guessing, go Chris, you can tell me since you came up with the prompt. The prompt for the first one was something plague doctor, right?
Oh yeah, this is a plague doctor making a potion, quote unquote, and then plague doctor sort of shape-shifting into a werewolf, and it did its best. I think that it looks really cool.
Yeah, Galthmore looks really cool, and I actually do feel I like how consistent the stylization on these two is. Like, they do feel like they belong together and they were kind of drawn together. Personally, I am still on the fence about the use of this VQGAN thing, because you'll see that it doesn't really it creates something that your mind starts to process as an image, but the more you look at it, the more it kind of like falls apart. And it is really kind of an abstract, non-representational thing. It just ends up looking kind of close to things that we're expecting. Enough about the art, let's talk about the card. This could be an interesting setup. Currently, we don't have a lot of rage and spirit, but we do have potential to splash around. This could be a useful rage setup because it can get you pretty crazy value off your own cards. You can use this as like a weird self-stack in spirit. Because if you hit one of your own units, you draw a card, net back the thing, so you could net a card off a token, and then transform into this 3/2 agile. The one thing I think this has a problem with, and somebody's already pointed this out on the Discord, is for the value transfer when you go transform, I feel like Galthmore needs evasion. I don't even know if it needs agile. Agile's nice. I would probably keep it, but it not being evasive on that side means that you're going from this card engine to something that's just going to die a lot of the time. And it will probably take something with it, but I personally would have liked this a little closer to what Delver is. Grief, what do you think about this?
Very strong turn 1 play. Outside of that, I don't really know how this is useful.
Yeah.
You will probably see it being used for experimental purposes in maybe Hawkins, maybe Dot. Not really in Bullock, to be honest, unless you're thinking about some grief sourcing it undead Bullock deck that can get away with basically skipping on a second unit to make a vulnerable first unit in play, and that's basically a Heldem thing. And I don't want to play this as a 2-cost. What I can probably see is this being used in KM as well. Maybe an active matters KM if that ever returns. But yeah, that's basically it. Powerful turn 1 play, even potentially good in Legacy. Everywhere else, I don't want to draw into this card.
Gokun, what do you think of this?
Well, as the designer, I'm a little bit biased, but I definitely designed this card very much to like tell a story. Yep. Like the good doctor harms his patients and reaps the rewards of it, but eventually experiment goes wrong and he turns into this beast. So like there are elements here where it's not really all the way like a self-sack card or a rage card.
Yeah.
Because there's always that risk of like being backed into a corner and losing your card value engine, which I don't know. I feel like all the different pieces that are drawing it in a bunch of different directions are good. Like I do enjoy the design, but that is because I am the designer. Like there is the aspect to it where you can use it as a ping tool to shoot your opponent's stuff at the cost of drawing them cards and then potentially losing your doctor, getting a beast. And then in some ways you can like call that, oh, this is like my turn one play, and I get my I trade, I get a 3/2 agile out of it. Like there's so many angles with which you can play with this card, which I'm hoping.
It is very versatile, and I do like that. You and I are both very flavorfully minded, I think, in a lot of our designs, and this does read as an interesting little story. So yeah, it's cool.
I am hoping that like versatility of a card becomes more of a theme, because as we move forward, I'm finding that more and more I like card designs that can do a lot in a few different situations and a few different decks, but maybe don't do any one thing perfectly.
Yeah. Toolbox cards.
Exactly.
Xon the Unimaginable is a 7-drop neutral 2/3 Nightmare God from Walnut. With untargetable, overrun, and summon, multiply stats by the number of units controlled, which I'm guessing means number of ally units, and shuffle your other units in play into your deck. End of turn, mill 10. This is a design by Entropic Mage, and of course, one of the great reasons we got to talk about this is because it is a card that Entropic designed for Grief's Realm. Entropic, for those of you who don't know, it doesn't communicate a lot on the Discord, so we get a lot of our messages from Entropic through his cards, and it's just so interesting to see the kind of things he churns out. Art here is really cool. It reads like a mess of cables, kind of, but you can definitely see the figure in it. But that's just kind of Entropic's style. He has a very distinctive kind of stylistic thing. This is, I feel like it's sitting at like 0. I really, really like parts of this design. I think the drawbacks are maybe a bit too much. For you to get what you need out of this with how late it comes out, you need to be controlling several units, and then you end up losing them. But he does have untargetable, and so I'm really on the fence about this. This is hard for me to evaluate. Greek's looking at me weird, so Greek's going to tell me this is way bonkers powerful. Go.
I'm looking at a card weirdly, not at you.
Okay. I'll let Gokun talk first then. Gokun, go.
Well, first of all, to speak to the art, I love what I'm perceiving to be a callback to a lot of the art that Grief did in the card creator, like these wispy lines, the color choices, everything is very, very faithful to Old Walnut, which I absolutely love. Like Entropic, he's a bit of a rogue, but like he's always on his shit when it comes to this stuff. Oh, we're allowed to curse on the podcast.
Don't worry about it.
Okay, my bad. But
what money?
Yeah, I'm feeling the same assessment that you're giving, Stranger, which is the drawbacks. I mean, I know that end of turn mill 10 is not supposed to be a drawback, but the shuffling units away and actually filling your own deck up back again, and like the play pattern of losing your turn to make one big untargetable thing and then just sort of ramming it into your opponent's face the next turn. I'm not sure if that's appealing to a lot of people right now. I can see
very kind of a Timmy
kind of
type
person
thing.
like this.
Well, it's like that summon is so double-sided, because if you're just going to throw out a board of 10 tokens, yeah, you're going to lighten the load when you get milled for 10 a little bit. You're going to, do that. But now you have you have all these like bad draws, like you're screwing over your future draws. Versus if you're playing like real units into this when they get shuffled in, then those units are now value that you have lost, and you're going to need blockers here in a minute. So well, actually, it creates a weird play pattern.
Yeah, let me double back on my assessment, because I'm starting to see who or what like people this design is for. There's one design which is like, I want a big untargetable overrunning thing to smash face with. That's, I think it is doing well, because 7 mana, you take your turn off, and like it's not the ideal way to play it, but it is going to do what you want it to do as a player if you're playing it for that reason. The other way to do it is if you're shuffling a bunch of nightmares back into your deck, that is not actually reducing your deck's draw power, and it's certainly not reducing your deck's mill power. A lot of the nightmares trigger off being milled, and I have sort of difficult feelings about mill as an archetype, which Grief and I have gone over at points in the past, but I can see how this is perhaps like a straight to legacy design, honestly, where the engine is supposed to reset and then start churning turn by turn.
Or something like that. Yeah, and I can see that. It's just, it does create very weird play patterns, and it's kind of hard to solve. But I think I like having cards like that are sort of like, and I'm not sure how you would play them or what this is going to do yet. So I'm all for this design. I really like this. I just wanted to know kind of why it wasn't sitting so well with others. Grief, what do you think?
Okay. To dismantle the code on the card, the drawback is funny enough not the mill 10, but the shuffled back. So the way to play this card is actually to cheat it out without actually summoning it.
Oh.
To reap the reward of the milling 10.
On an untargetable engine. I see.
The thing is, you can try to build up to a 7-cost unit that you dump on the table, and a flame deck of all, flame elemental deck, because all the elementals when they leave play will be banished, so they don't fill up your deck. And yeah, I now have my whatever, Untitled Overrun, and if you cannot remove it, it will kill you next turn, which is cool, which is very Timmy. It is a nightmare, so it is actually fetchable via Dreamer into the self-mill engine. But yeah, this is a reward for self-mill decks that want to have a way to play this outside of hardcasting it, because that's funny enough what the mill decks don't want. Mill decks currently in Legacy have like 3 to 4 archetypes when it comes to nightmares alone, and the aggressive mid-range, the more aggressive mid-range variant is playing more units because they are being either discarded or milled and therefore casted into play, and that's the way how they actually fill up the board. But that doesn't help you because it's still a 7-cost hardcast unit. It's not cost reduction itself. It has no value in the grave. It has no value in hand and not in the deck. This card wants to be targeted and reanimated or freecasted in any way. Freecasted, quote unquote, into an empty board, sure, or even in a board where your units are non-sequential. For control type self-mill decks, but at that point you're also running the risk of playing cards you don't want to mill or need rebound cards, and so on and so forth. And so at the end of the day, how easy is it for you as a deck builder with a Grave Souls deck to implement an engine that you have to build around for a mill 10 at the end of turn?
So you're thinking, and this kind of gets at maybe the reason why this isn't doing so hot is because you're thinking this is complex and this requires a lot of forethought, and that's what I'm starting to think about this.
Yeah, there's so many layers to this.
It's unimaginable.
Yeah, like I would imagine that this is a problem that hits a lot of cards, which is like on the subreddit, you have a snap decision, you make a vote, and then you go. And that's not to say that that is an unreasonable decision, but there are cards like this which go so deep in such interesting ways that we can't really get to experience them the way.
And it's like the source of our updates, where it's like a lot of these cards are like, oh, I didn't think of what it would be like to play against this card, or play with this card, right? So this is the flip side of that, where it's like I'm not going to be able to see what that is until I actually sit down and play with it.
Like Doctor, this is an experimental and versatile design. I want to see more cards like this moving forward, where you see it and have no fucking clue what to use it for.
Yeah. Aimee, the Hoarder, is a 2-drop spirit 2/1 trash cat from nowhere in particular. With summon, if your deck has more than 60 cards, choose one to draw. Otherwise, create the Hoarder's Place. The Hoarder's Place is a 1-drop 0/1 trash place with can attack and entomb, scout, and equipment that costs 2 or less. I think this is interesting. So it definitely does play to trash. Part of it honestly reads like it could have been like sort of a deck that cares about like shuffling a lot of cards into your, so like the Black Rift deck that's running Master of Portals. That gives you a way to fill your deck in the middle of things. This is interesting because it creates these weird incentives. You have to be running much more than 60 cards. So you have to have 60 when you drop this. And then that gives you a tutor. Otherwise, you get this single equipment. So this is another interesting versatile design. Gokun, what do you think of it?
I think that this is a great design that is a little bit ironically cluttered.
Yeah,
I think that
I agree.
The core design of telling people, okay, build a bunch of like 100-card decks and then hope that you get to Aimee the Hoarder. Like, I think that that's really fun. I think that the Hoarder's place, I don't know exactly how the trash deck is supposed to run, but I'm just ignoring the synergy there. I don't think that it's very interesting. I feel like you could just make this summon, draw a card. If your deck has 60 or more cards, choose one to draw instead. And it would be cleaner and it would still keep this same like impression. Also, I want to say one thing, which is people center the subject of your card art in the middle, or else it's not going to be like in the oval when it's actually played as a unit.
Yeah, to me, this is like, I didn't even know. I thought this was like a VQGAN thing almost because it's off to the corner. I didn't realize that Aimee was this thing up here because the subject wasn't centered. I'm iffy about your assessment, Gokun. The thing I like about this card is it can be 2 cards. For decks that want to run more than 60, have a means of shuffling like the Master of Portals, or just running a bunch of cards like Hive Mind Queen, those decks get a tutor. Now, what do normal decks get? Normal decks get a little 2/1 that they're free to buff, and a way to protect that value, which equipment decks have problems with potentially getting losing a lot of card advantage, in a second unit that's a good blocker that also generates an equipment. So the versatility of this card is what I like. It still feels a little disjointed, and that's probably the art doing things to my brain. But when you look at it as this is actually trying to be 2 different cards, it sort of clicks with me. And I like that. I think it's really admirable and really creative and interesting. Grief, what do you think?
Basically the direction, but yeah, from a completely different angle. This is an equipment scout card, primarily. And only if you're playing Hive Mind Queen in Legacy, this is something else. Let's be honest, this card will always be just an equipment scouting card. And as I said, that's fine. It's okay. For Legacy players, Hive Mind Queen, this will be an instant windmill slam into their deck, because this is their only version of a tutor in a game that really works with them.
Yeah, and I do love how for trash, and yeah, this is supposed to be there's no wall knocked on here for some reason, but this hits Rebar Sword, this hits Improv Shanker, which is kind of iffy, but that's okay. This could end up possibly getting you the Tin Can Helmet, which is not bad. And then, of course, this could hit you a myriad of different, just regular equipment. It could hit the Curios, Fangs. Fangs is a great thing to hit off this. So yeah, the 2 or less equipment is actually a pretty good pool. So yeah, I everything except just the way the art is. I really, I think, like this card. How's it sitting? I forgot to record it.
I think it's doing all right.
It's doing all right. Here's hoping. Okay, the Dream Digester is a 3-drop Spirit 3/3 horror from Mortstall. With when a player draws a card, banish that card, and end of turn, return cards banished by this into owner's hands. Is very much a grief card. Like I feel like the order of the names on this were switched. So what this does is it gives you this weird like amnesia. What is it? There's the induced amnesia from Magic, but like on steroids and for both players. And oh, everyone's losing their hand. And this creates interactions that are frightening to say the least. And the biggest, scariest thing about this card and what it does is if Digester dies, the card will not come back. For those of you who upvoted this, for those of you who downvoted this, make sure you understand that the cards do not come back if the thing dies. And so what do I feel about it? What is, that's my job, is to not explain cards, but to describe, but to criticize them. This is frightening. This could open us up to all sorts of interesting, like, stacksy stuff. One other cool thing you could do with this, if you want to splash this, and this is just, strangers like 20 favorite cards, whatever. Playing around with this with Raptear and the Art Forger guy. Can give you a really fun sense of, oh, you could run this in improv to win, right? So you're running this with the Art Forger, you draw a bunch of cards, create a bunch of copies. The copies you drew go away, and you're just holding all the non-native copies, which is the good stuff in that deck. So yeah, really creative and interesting and weird, and could open up some scary stuff. I could see why people would downvote this card, because it's just a play pattern that some people don't like to play against. Grief, what do you think of this? Tell me about your process designing this, helping design this.
The funniest thing, my suggestion was that if it's removed, the cards don't return. Because that's a proper grief thing to do. A Wookiee really lacks Dex cards, and I really want my Stacks archetype to finally get into game. And we have a lot of designs like the Magician cycle of cards that allow interact with drawing, mass drawing, or hand looping, or wheel effects, and so on and so forth. And yeah, technically, this also rewards you for playing cards that care about being banished, or care about copying cards or stealing cards from your opponent. Think of cards like very old callback to Alien Formant, which functions in a way where players where you don't draw from your deck, because technically you draw, then put it back. You draw a card, it gets banished. You create a copy from the top of the deck from your opponent while banishing their card. Then at the end of the turn, you return a card that you couldn't draw.
Oh.
I'm realizing, okay, this is so much combo potential, because I just remembered, and this one's my card. I should have caught this. It took so long to get it in, I forgot about this. The grossest card this combos with is Institution Impatient, which did get in.
Exactly.
So with Institution Impatient, the cards don't come back, ever. And you can create a true hardlock scenario. That, my friends, is enough to encourage me to build a deck with this. I really want to see this card in. Because I originally thought, oh, this won't create a hardlock scenario. Never mind, this isn't as degenerate as I thought. It's like, not only does it do it, it does it with my card.
Welcome to Knowledge Pool
Guys,
Collective Edition.
let this card into the game. It'll be fine. Learn a new play style for once. Come on, we can't have this community that's so insular that only allows approved play styles. Let's do this. Institution Impatient combo, let's go. Gokun, what do you think of it?
It's time that people get out of the tutorial mode.
I do have one question about this for Grief if you've been involved in the blocking. Does this work if you does it return the cards if you flicker it or sack it and then bring it back?
From what I've heard from Taza, it actually remembers the card it banished.
Ah, it remembers permanently. That's a darn shame. But it's so close to being beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I love all the ways that this combos. I'm not one who likes to play the quote unquote mean combo deck, but I just think that the look here of Alley Informant plus Dream Digester plus Institution Inpatient, that sounds so janky and so fun. I just want to see something like that happen. I mean, besides setting things on fire and letting it burn, I talking about just the card in like a non-combo deck, you can still use it to disrupt tempo, to slow down decks that rely very strongly on cantrips, and like that keeps you sort of on the edge for aggro if you're playing the quote-unquote bear side.
It is still a hate bear.
Yeah, no, the combo isn't with Alley Informant. You can do it with Alley Informant. You do it with Sketch Time Imitator, so that you now have an infinite deck, and you just keep drawing your own cards and copying them.
Yeah.
This, funny enough, actually immediately finds home on Legacy as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it goes so many places. I do think that if this were to go around and get in, I would want to see its stats be adjusted to be more aggressive, not only to like support that play style of using it as a tempo disruption tool, but also letting each side of the equation, each player have the option to blow it up more easily. I think that it's more engaging if everybody has an equal shot at like shooting it down.
Especially considering this can, hard lock your opponent out of the game.
Yeah. I would like to see it more fragile but more aggressive. But this is great. I love it. Hats off to these first 4 designs, by the way. I see that you've chosen a lot of really versatile cards, and they're all great.
Yeah. Okay, this is in the Grief's pick. Starting with the Matter Muncher is a 2-drop neutral 3/3 Wisp from Chromosome, Overrun Shapeshift, Entrance, Shift -1 an ally unit, give it Shapeshift forever. Now, I've kind of already talked about this card. I think we talked about it last week. It has been tweaked since. And basically my stance on the card stays the same. I don't really see why this is both Shapeshift and Shift. And for some, the play pattern of shifting a unit down is going to be interesting and compelling. Just for me, it isn't. So I'll let Grief talk about why you picked the card first.
The context is more or less Mistfist in the context of creating cards. Mistfist will, they will create 1-drops, but every other token generating card has aspects to it that actually are counterproductive. Even in our strongest token generators, there are some weaker tokens if you're looking at ensemble tokens, like be it Dan Smith, be the Sleuth Slatan, be it the Morgedal card, the
Crimson Caravan,
Caravan, Sands of Mirage, etc. There are cards that you may or may not want to shift down, and moving forward minus shifting is actually an interesting idea, considering that in standard you have a more controllable card pool. So certain ranges for summon units that, let's say that the 2 cost range of base cost range is a pool that has very strong entrance or immediate impact cards that are not over-flooded with summon effects, but have passives and stuff like that. So downshifting 3-cost units, which in a pool which has more entrance, more summon effects, more active abilities that you once use and then never again, and so on and so forth, you can actually capitalize on that to try to get into a more useful pool. Unlike upshifting, which allows you to get more stronger cards for cheaper discounts over the course of the game, which is partially strengthened by the point of shapeshift if we're talking of a context of a tribal first deck. Issue is, if you're building a tribal first deck, what is the value of the card pool you're hitting?
And that's my biggest thing. Like, the fact is, if you're using this for a tribal deck, and you say, okay, sure, I want to downshift a 2 into a 1, why are you just not running that 1? Right?
And that's
Unless you care about it being non-native.
That's why I was talking, that's why I was taking Mist Fist as an example.
Yeah.
Because we were hinting at the possibility of an harmonized deck.
Yeah.
And that's not caring about the quality of the tribe, first and foremost, but the accessibility of tribe combinations and harmonized combinations as a keyword.
I could maybe see something like that. It would require a lot of like futzing around with. Gokun, what do you think of this?
I am coming at this from a perspective where I'm trying to selectively remove words on the card. I think it's a good way to assess a card the first time you see it. You look at it in pieces and assess, okay, what if I took this piece off? What if I took this piece off? If you take Shapeshift off this card, it's just kind of like Unga Bunga, a little bit below curve, not doing much unless you really know the card pool, and just kind of swinging face. If you bring Shapeshift back and try to, you know, try to work with just a tribal deck, then you find yourself losing tempo in order to get a 2-mana 3/3 with Overrun. And it's just, I feel like the cross section there is a little too narrow, whereas before, I mean, comparing it to these other cards we've seen, like, they fit into so many decks, and this one fits into one or none very specifically. That's my worry with it. I think.
Well, yeah, and that's I think the biggest issue with me is I designed a lot of shapeshifters. Shapeshifters was going to be a big thing in my room, and I think of them as primarily hole fillers, and I think that's a noble duty, right?
Yeah.
I think Galaxian Soda Jerk showing up as a one-off in a Fiowin deck, well, not Fiowin, but something deck, is a noble pursuit. This doesn't fill any hole I know of in any deck, and as such, yeah, I could see it maybe fitting into a harmonized thing if we were to build that up, but I just don't think the card pool is there for it.
Yeah, like, one thing that sort of weirds me out is when Shapeshift seems to be becoming its own thing, as if it's a keyword that you can build a deck around, like Harmonize, where it really isn't. It's something that you add to a card with maybe slightly off color, maybe slightly sort of off theme art, but you want a tool to be available to all tribes. And in this case, I think that it's falling a little flat.
Exactly.
Castlestormer Oni is a 5-drop mine 3/4 Demon Samurai from Yamato with Agile, Overrun, and end of turn in hand. This gets +1 attack, and entrance deal damage equal to this card's attack. So this very, very much feels like it. Yeah, Space Turtle and Dia sounds about right. I think.
Now, what's that supposed to mean?
Well, no, like it feels, I don't know. It just feels very like apropos to their kind of thoughts and styles. This reminds me of like the Moose Moss problem, where by the time, suppose you decided to keep this, right? In your opening mulligan, you're like, I'm going to hold on to this one. I'm feeling confident today. That's going to pay off for you. You're going to have dropping it on 5, you're gonna have a really, really powerful bolt. You're gonna be able to hit some for 8. That's like a It's like a third of our health. In other situations, though, I feel like, okay, sure, this is going to be a 4/4 hitting for 4 and then attacking for 4. I would say it's overtuned, but it's very high rolly. Like, you have to make bad decisions to get it to do the high rolly thing. And so it feels weird. Grief, tell me how I'm wrong. Go ahead.
This is a 5-cost deal 3 damage to anything with a body. With upside.
Yeah.
That scales. This fits into anything mind. And moving forward. By the way, this is a Kagemusha target, my dude.
Yeah.
So even if you want to do that package, you have the option to, but why would you? It's okay, you're playing Kagemusha for, what was it, 2 or 3, and playing an off-color Kagemusha, Castlestormer Oni to get bold. That's not what you want to do. This is a card are you playing mind, or technically moving forward, you can fit this into any deck. It is still a body that scales, depending on how early you're drawing it. Even as a 2-off, this is good, because you have to consider we have an Imperial card in the game that scales off of damage dealt over the course of the game. While this is in hand, it costs less and deals damage equal to its cost. This is a strictly better version of it in any sense and any situation, because even at a very bad situation of playing it for 5, you have still an agile overrun dude that deals 3 damage to anything, usually also blockers.
Yeah.
On an aggressive board, you're getting rid of blockers. This is a game ender when you're drawing into it. At any time, at any course of the game, any action spam deck with a unit base, or any burn deck that is partially aggressive can use this as a game finisher.
I feel like this is too powerful, though.
This is actually at a point where you have to say, okay, we can start with 2 attack. We can play it at 3 attack for now to see how it actually pans out. But this is to the point where even I say at legacy level, this is tier 1, tier 1.5 card quality for a competitive setting in blue.
So, for those of you who don't speak Grief, this is too powerful to let into standard.
No. Standard is, I mean, you've got like the weird widow card, the new spider.
Yeah, I don't know.
This is like adrenaline for aggro decks here.
See, and I play single player. I play goofy stuff. So like when I see this and I'm like, now that I'm evaluating it and running it over in my head, I was like, this is too good to be true. Maybe we should not let that card into the game, even for Stranger to have and play with in the single player matches. I'm trying to look out for people. Empty isn't here today. Gokun, what do you think of this?
Stranger, it's so very valiant that you have sacrificed your single player experience for us, because this card just seems like a little too much. I'm thinking of Scourge of the Night, and I know that that's not very relevant right now, but I feel like it's a good sort of comparison point to start with. Add Agile to that. We still have evasion. Take 2 cost off. Scale the damage up. Potentially, like once you get to turn 10, potentially this is doing like 9-8 damage if you kept this in your starting hand, or you drew this early. Like, there's so much variance in the effects. I worry very much about it. I do like some things about this design. I like that it plays into samurai and like their sort of heraldry. I like that it's a Kagemusha target, but I do think that this is something that could potentially warp the meta enough that you run this in strength, you run this in spirit, you might just run this anywhere you can get it, because wherever you draw it, it's a game ender.
Well,
but staples are good.
Well, the thing I have problems with is it has like turn 1 double strike, right? It has agile. It's going to hit you bad, and then it's going to come running at you with Overrun. So if you kept this in your opening hand, on turn 5, unless this is interrupted, you are dealing 16 damage to something. Maybe not what you intended, but to something.
Yeah,
right?
or it clears blockers. Like, it's super versatile
Yeah.
in all the wrong ways. I would go so far as to say that this has to be an exclusive card, because this would have to be a mind exclusive sort of game ender, I feel. It's just so yeah, I know. You're not into it.
The thing is though, this is hyper aggressive for burn and for aggro. And the comparison to Scourge of the Night is a little bit iffy. The better, funny enough, comparison would be Abyss Salamander.
Yeah, kind of.
Abyss Salamander was format warping.
It's sort of a blend, I'd say. I mean, back when Scourge of the Night was very important, the whole game was slower. Now we
but that was
this is our modern.
That was like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point, that format was like 3 years ago. Salamander is like, in terms of aggressiveness and importance for aggro decks and how early it closes out games, because Scourge of the Night was in a time where all decks were slower, most people had game plans, and there were more degenerate bullshit going around. But this is an aggro finisher, turn 4 to 6. This is extremely powerful, and I love it for it. I'm not saying that it is not too powerful, because it is. Thing is, though,
He admits it.
The thing is, though, we probably have to take into account the quality of our defensive units and actions moving forward in Standard and Legacy, and even how cheese-worthy our single-player mode can be, because that's one of the very few ways I enjoy our single-player mode. I exploit it from level 1, and that's it. So this is more or less a question of general power level of the formats, and from a competitive integrity standpoint, this is hyper aggro. And in the tournaments that I was hosting, this was something that was partially missing in terms of having a game closer for specific other decks to give them at least a fighting advantage. On the other hand, you can easily tech against it, or if even in that kind of system or format, it is still deemed too powerful, it can be updated, or in the sense of Legacy, be banned or limited and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's sitting at 1, and I think we've determined why it's sitting at 1, so I'm going to move past it.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Peer Beyond is a 2-drop neutral right from the Genesis with exhaust any number of friendly units and draw that many cards. So we have another VQGAN piece. This one, I think it's really weird because LunaticDancer has drawn pieces for 2 of these ones. He's like resubbing with VQGAN pieces. I get that he likes his style, but I liked Lunatic. He put so much work and so much love into some of those. This, I think we've seen another version of this before, is part of this whole self-exhaust thing. I don't... For a single-player guy, I'm going to talk as me first. It's not the kind of thing I think is particularly fun because it gets around... because all I need to do is keep one blocker up and the AI stupids out on me. This is encouraging me to keep my blockers down and turn the AI smart again. As a guy who's played a teensy tiny bit of multiplayer, I don't know where the pace is in the current meta for this, but I'd imagine it's not faring too well. It is cheap, and you have to exhaust at least 2, I think, to get the value out of this. How do we feel about it? Gokun, I'll let you go first.
I mean, how I feel about it is that it's a neat design. I think it scales a lot more aggressively than a card that I consider a companion piece to this that we're going to be talking about later. But I think this is close to finished, and it just seems weird to me that the mana cost is too neutral. I feel as if this is clearly a mind effect and it should maybe cost a little bit more than 2, but that's where I am.
Because you gotta exhaust 2 units to draw 2, which is where, by the way, that's where 3 becomes fair, right? So at 3, you'd have to exhaust 3 units to get the value you need off of it, which, well, you actually have to exhaust 4 because it's 3 in mind. You know, in a lot of formats, like, I don't know, you'd have to do a lot of exhausting to do that. The reason why this is neutral, as I understand, I'm going to try and be a faithful expositor of Lunatic's thought process. He wanted to see these rights, a lot of them in both spirit and mind. And so he was going from, I think, spirit being the primary self-exhaust, and so that's why this ended up in neutral. Grief, what do you think of this?
This needs to be neutral because nothing in mind actually provides you the, enough board advantage to, well, wholeheartedly speaking, gives you the right to tap down units unmolested, considering that, yeah, okay, I just lost Temple, board presence for 2 cards being drawn, and we're going to talk about a companion piece, which is way better than this one. This card is really bad. It costs you board presence, and in the AI aspect that Stranger Side mentioned, this actively can lose you games against our caveman AI. Put it into context of actually playing against a real person. You don't have the time in our game to spend 2 mana and board presence to draw 2 cards. 3 means that you're losing 3 units on the board that you've probably paid like 4 mana, 5 mana into, while your opponent is playing the game.
Yeah.
You cannot even use the cards that you're drawing into for something. We have way better card advantage engines with weird impactful drawbacks that can be turned into profit for you. This doesn't. We don't have the synergies available to us to, well, actively work off of the self-exhaust. We have only 1 unit.
We need more like it, I think, to get this kind of thing to work.
Exactly.
Or one thing, and maybe this is a radical opinion, I think this could be cheaper.
Yes.
Like,
this needs to be like 1 cost.
Yeah, sitting at 1, maybe all of a sudden, because I'll still be able to play the cards I'm getting off of this, even in early turns, I could maybe see this at 1. So we'll see.
Yeah, I can see what you guys are saying now. It's more and more looking like I'm just misevaluating based on my understanding of how card advantage works.
Yeah, it's okay. I barely look at these cards before I start the show every episode. Except the ones I pick. Those I'm being incredibly careful and totally not just selecting at random. Pennypincher is a 1-drop spirit 3/3 human from nowhere in particular with end of turn. If you don't hoard, this duels you. So it's a 1-drop 3/3, but to not make it hit you for 3, you have to have had an extra mana. This is so interesting to me for so many reasons. First of all, the whole hoard is a drawback type thing where you like need to hoard. The art is so gorgeous. My fiance actually wanted to go around and make a realm based around like Victorian London where this kind of guy would have fit right in. And I'm so sad that she didn't really like go any further with this because this would have been a perfect fit. It's really pretty, really cool, really flavorful. And it's Puopka trying again to make a balanced 1-drop 3/3, which is a fun adventure. I've been there alongside Puopka for many steps of this journey. And I think this might be hitting on it. Gokun, what do you think of this?
Trying to read this properly and evaluate properly. I feel like what this ends up being, if we're calling a 1 mana, 1 mana 3/3, in the deck that this wants to play in, this is 1 mana 3/3, end of turn, take 3 damage. Because if you're losing the mana value each turn and trying to mitigate that damage, then you're losing out on the advantage of having the 1 mana 3/3.
Yeah.
So it's just an aggressive 3/3. Every turn it hits you, and then if you buff it, that's bad. If you give it life bond, that's good. There's a couple different things going on. But
or you could buff it and give it life bond with fake fangs on 2.
That's true. Yeah, exactly. It's like it doesn't take too much to mitigate the downside, and I can see this working since it's spirit and they are. I don't imagine that the spirit aggro deck is doing super well right now. The one thing that sort of confuses me is the choice of the horde wording here. If horde becomes a keyword, I'm expecting that it would be a trigger keyword, and I think this just sort of wouldn't work with the implementations that we've seen so far for keywords.
It is worded a little weird, I do agree, but it's fair. I get what it means. That's all that matters in the long run.
Yeah.
And this doesn't break any rules like the early Sweets Golem. That still makes me mad. It's not actually, I guess it's not wrong. There's not enough standards to really say. It is a little confusing, I guess, because Horde says activate this ability, and we're very specifically not activating the ability. We have an unhorde card, folks. Grief, what do you think of this?
I love this. Green aggro, self damage, which most availability, with the largest availability to gain life bond. Unlike strength, which also has self-harm effects, this can actually be a crossover card, because even as a 2-drop, at worst, this says, okay, 2 mana, 3/3 vanilla, at the end of the turn, deal 3 damage to you. I already hear some red self-damage players salivating over that. Because that's just good. Yeah, not much that I can actually say. I love the Scrooge Christmas story art, which is definitely the inspiration for the artwork. But overall, we will probably see this being played in Daylings, probably in plans as a 3-off, because it's just a good aggressive unit and you have enough life gain to actually mitigate the drawback and so on and so forth. So it only becomes the problem of dealing 2 damage to you if you cannot really race against the clock and are facing a different aggro deck.
I'm going to move on. Vigorous Wisp is a 2-drop Spirit 1/4 Wisp from Chromosome with Splash. Reduce the cost of a random unit in hand by 1. For those of you who don't remember, Splash triggers whenever you play an off-affinity card. So it is, folks, a card that can give us back the value we lost from an off-affinity play. It does so randomly. It does so in kind of an erratic fashion. But it does so. And that matters. I like the style on this. I think it's interesting seeing a Spikebird interpret a Wisp from an art perspective. It's gorgeous. It's haunting. It reminds me of so many things. Gives me sort of like an Oddworld vibe almost. I'm not the kind of guy who does a lot of splashing, so it's a little tricky for me to evaluate. But I could definitely see splash decks wanting to run something like this, just because it gives you the value back. You hit 2 of them, suddenly you're netting value. This seems like maybe, and Grief is going to probably tell me I'm too ambitious when I'm saying this, our new Rainbow Golem, or Prism, the Rainbow Prism. That reduces your off-affinity cards by 1.
I know
Kind of
what
does
you're
a
talking
similar
about.
thing. What?
Narrowing his eyes suspiciously, he does.
Okay. Grief, what do you think of this?
Spoiler alert, not the biggest fan of Splash the keyword. I like splashing. Don't like splash the keyword because it is, funny enough, not doing a lot of good things or doesn't really benefit in the context of collective. Collective, you usually only splash if a card allows you to do so, or if the card value is pretty good, even at a +1 mana cost. You're not doing it in an aggressive fashion where recurable reductions of 1 mana on a random hand card are really worth it. Because rainbow decks haven't been really a thing since forever. Yeah, sure, you can think about KM and a way of changing outfits and playing multicolor cards, yada yada yada. But I'm talking about like rainbow decks where you're playing even off affinity cards for 1 mana, for 0 mana, and so on and so forth, because you're getting the ramp and the cost reduction to the point where this is possible to basically card sling left and right, which Gertie, funny enough, did like 3 years back when Rainbow was a thing back then. Ever since then, people want to get back to some to a certain deck that works like that, and Splash is clearly a way to do so, but we're extremely lacking in cards that actually allow you to multicast these cards. Yes, this is a step in the right direction, but I'm still not playing a splash deck because the card value is too bad to do so. If all my cards have splash on them, then maybe, especially if they're costing like 1 to 3 mana.
But then do we want to go that far where splash becomes just a benefit instead of a drawback?
I mean, at that point, it's a deck archetype.
Okay. But yeah, I agree. Well, I guess I don't know enough really about the card pool to speak too much on this. So Gokun, I'll let you talk on it.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to keep, I feel like I keep standing on the exact opposite end of grief when it comes to some of these card evaluations. Like,
this was to be expected when I agreed to have you on the show.
Yeah, for sure. I love splash as a keyword, and the more I think about it, the more I think I like it. And it's because it gets away from that mono affinity, like full efficiency deck building. I think I like cards that encourage you not to build specifically for your one deck idea all the way every day and like fully support that. I like these cards that really drag you in new directions and like get you really expanding the card pool that you're considering for your deck.
And I think it does that for people like you and me, but I think for everyone else, it's going to create a monolithic good stuff deck.
For everyone else, the good stuff deck is always on the horizon, I feel. Like,
yeah,
I think that one of the reasons that I feel weird about seeing Splash is that I remember playing like a single game against Blood Painter and thinking, no, never again, never, ever, ever again. Because there's so many, there's so many ways that this can go wrong. But I feel like there's so many ways that it can go right. Sort of the awkwardness, the clunkiness, I'm here for it.
Yeah. So I don't know. This isn't my kind of card. So I would be interested in playing around with it and doing those goofy experiments we talked about because that's how me and Gokun think. But we'll see. It's only sitting at 4, so might not get in.
I think we can all agree that it's not a great card, but I think it's good for the game, if that means anything.
Yeah. The week is still young, so we'll see where it goes.
I can see that.
The Octospotter is a 3-drop mine 3/1 fish pirate from Osagarth. With summon, steal a card that costs 3 or less from your opponent's hand. Cornmeal. I like this fella. He's cute. He's interesting. It's very weird to see Corn do something so cute and goofy. A little tricky to read, but I think I get it. The actual card itself, so we're building up steel, pirates, arg. I do wish it neutralized because I think that would just be a better general thing for neutral or for steel. That's a me thing. Especially because when this pulls something that costs 3, it's going to cost 4 on your end. Besides that, I think the design's perfectly fine, and I could see it probably didn't do what I just said because it's a common. Grief, what do you think of this?
Love it. I like hand disruption. We need more of it. Clean design.
In a Legacy, the high roll, of course, is getting a lost cause from your opponent. Being able to disrupt their hand disruption.
No, I think if you're dropping this card onto your opponent, you're probably getting stuff like Psychic Split,
Yeah.
which is then neutral, which allows you to hand disrupt your combo disrupt your opponent. You can get the combo engines that they have in hand. You can actually steal their Barked Baker for the food combo decks, and so actually there are very many decks that can actually use this as an attack card for.
Yeah. Well, and stealing anything that retriggers summons is always really fun, because then you get free cards, more free cards. Gokun, what do you think about this? Opposite agree?
Agree. Jog my memory. I didn't quite hear you the first time. Do you like this card?
Yes.
All right. Well, I have to hate it then. No, I like it. I think it's really cute. Part of this is the influence from the art, where I'm looking at this thing and thinking that's not exactly an octopus. It's just off enough to be very, very cute. But I do have one single gripe with it that does not stop me from wanting to vote it in, of course, which is that it, in a mirror matchup, steals Octospotters from your opponent, creating this weird setup where like whoever's on the initiative grabs it and then sort of keeps on rolling.
Oh, this is so fun in the mirror.
Maybe it's just an odd little thing, but I like the idea that when you Octospotter, you see the other Octospotter in your opponent's hand and think, oh no, he's gonna take the card back. I think that's funny. So my suggested change for this would be to slap one more stat point on it, maybe, and then make it steal cost 2 or less. I know that that's worse, like a lot worse, since so many good things are at 3, but I don't think that it should be able to steal other Octospotters.
If you see your Octospotter in your opponent's hand, you're just going to steal their Octospotter.
Exactly.
Yeah, it takes away, what I think is that it takes away like the decision making, because you go, oh, Octospotter, I just grab the Octospotter.
No, that's your high roll. That's your high roll, Gokun.
Yeah.
You're excited
but it's
for
also
that to happen. Your opponent's bummed, but you're excited.
It just feels entirely unearned, because if you're playing this on 3, like this is just the reward for being on initiative, which
that's what a high roll is, Gokun.
Exactly.
High rolls are not earned.
I mean, the thing is, when you pointed that interaction out, I got numb flashbacks from Mind of War matches.
Mind of War battle.
Mind of War battles are completely different in context compared to Octospotter. Octospotter has the higher potential of having Octospotter battles where, okay, I'm dropping this, I see the Octospotter, what else is in their hand? To the point where you're asking yourself, if you're stealing a card and if the stolen card is the Octospotter and they get to either play their stuff out because their Octospotter comparably saved the other cards, or if you're stealing the other card and force your opponent into using their Octospotter not offensively but defensively to get back the card that you just stole.
Yeah. I think it creates an interesting play pattern.
Exactly.
Okay, I can see that.
The Whispering Communion is a 1-drop neutral right from the Genesis with exhaust any number of friendly units and choose a card that costs that much or less from your deck and draw it. So this is a companion card to the thing we saw earlier. I see, and this is just because these kind of things are very much like those Rorschach ink blots. I see like Nicolas Cage in this piece here. And I see that mask art that's been floating around on the free art sheet in that eye. And I see, of course, the basilica or the church, whatever, in the background. This, again, makes me wonder why LunaticDancer in particular is using VQGAN. I like his art so much. Like, it makes me almost a little sad. This piece in particular feels much more non-representational than the rest. And for those of you who don't know, Stranger is not a big fan of hallucinogenica and non-representational art. For those of you who like it, I mean, it's your thing. It's just a little goofy for me, especially because I like the guy. VQGAN is just sort of weird to use, but I will probably do a video explaining more on this. Gokun, thoughts?
Short of doing like a full art dive, because I do love this. I love how a machine makes this. I can see two figures talking to each other, one whispering very intimately, like almost directly into the other person's brain. Like, I think that this is somehow, through total chance, an amazing representation of what the card is doing. But with that being that set aside, because we're talking about the card, I think that this is my favorite tutor I've ever seen. I think it takes that very real cost of exhausting your units and turns that into something very powerful. And like, I enjoy that. I really think that this is about as good as a tutor design gets. Not good strength-wise, but good in sort of how you can engage with your opponent.
I like this on turn 6 or whatever. Just make sure that I get my Grave Rave. This is my extra copies of Grave Rave in a Green Man deck. Because who cares? I'm exhausting everything anyway. This could be a good Turbo Fog card. I could definitely see running this in like a Turbo Fog setup. And that actually gives the exhaust, I think, some more meaning, where you're deliberately playing around that part of the thing. Beyond that, tutors for cheap stuff. That I could definitely see running that as like a good part of your deck. I would be running this in decks that only care about like a small number of cheap cards. Trashmaster General kind of likes this card because you're filtering out your communions, then you're going to filter out your other card. It's just getting more into the garbage. So yeah, Grief, what do you think of this?
Maybe as a tool of a self-sec that is running a glowstone mine engine, because the glowstones are only there to be sacked. They cannot attack or block and don't have actives, so you can actually exhaust them.
Yeah, in Legacy, this has a lot of fun applications.
But the format is way faster, so the only reason you actually do this is to either combo off with a board presence, but then the question is, what are you sacrificing your board presence for? And comparison to the other draw card, this is way better, because you'll usually use this only to fetch 2 to 3 cost cards for combos.
Yeah.
For that, or even the case of 4 to 5 cost cards, because that's good in this case, because we have a 1 cost card that allows you to actually tutor those cards. So the initial cost is, or the initial up payment isn't too high for control board vibes, like you mentioned. Issue is, control decks don't really have the board presence that allow you to run the high cost cards to tutor them. Combo decks do get away with this more often, because in the case of stuff like King Loop combos and similar entities, they only have summon effects or entrance effects, and you're bouncing them 24/7 anyways to loop to continue your loop. So you have actually the freedom to utilize those exhaust effects on them. And this is only a combo engine card. Aggro decks can potentially get away with this. Here's why: because you're searching a Wincon Lord or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of all these scenarios, this is still a mediocre card. Or instead, very mediocre, because you're just not getting the value out at a point where either the game tempo matters or the board state.
I do agree that 2 to 3 is the sweet spot outside of Turbo Fog, where you care about 4 to 5. In any other situation, it better win. And for that reason, I think this is maybe too much.
Way better than a card draw card, though.
Mm-hmm, definitely. I agree that this is a much better design if we're just doing A/B testing.
Yeah, for sure. This also gets this fetches Glorious Vault at least, which is something without even exhausting anything. So grabbing 0 mana stuff. I don't know. I love it for the reasons that Grief is slightly down on it. Like it does demand that you commit to the board.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay. Now, for the Hanging Jokester is a 2-drop mine 3/1 Nightmare from Walnocht with summon mill 3. And the first time this enters the graveyard each turn, put it into your hand, then discard a card. Hats off to Tahazar. He wins my VQGAN Card of the Week award because I did not notice this was generated by an AI. I was thinking, okay, this is a Walnocht thingy. It definitely looks like it's got circus tents in the background. I am 100% feeling this card, this art-wise. And I'm gonna let Grief talk first about the actual design, because I have a feeling that as degenerate as I think this is 2 to 3 times as much degenerate. I'm living for it, but the MP crowd might be concerned. Grief, go.
Welcome to the age of Disco Mill. Saturday Night Disco, where we're trying to mill and discard our hand 24/7 to get the payoffs. You want to activate your anxiety attack in Legacy? No problems. Draw 3 cards, discard 2, discard a Hanging Jokester, and maybe another card. Oh, get a Hanging Jokester back and discard your Wisp. Now you even draw two more cards. There is so much stuff that fits into this, oh boy, and so on and so forth. This is basically what I was talking about when I was saying, yeah, we have aggressive mid-range unit-based decks that love to actually get their board presence in. This is a Jester. A pretty damn good Jester. Jester, on the other hand, gets you the body on the board. This actually interacts with the looping potential of cards in hand and synergizes way better with the discard engines. Because this only cares about entering the graveyard, which is also an aspect of Nightmares that I'm very much proud of, and this just fits the mold of combining these 2 aspects.
Yeah, the synergies, idle contracts, the Ghost of the Opera thing. I don't even know where to begin or where to end with this card, because I'm sure that this is capable of doing all sorts of really interesting stuff.
This is a card you actually never want to never want to play. This is a card that has to stay in your hand to get the best to get the best possible value out of it.
I mean, in a pinch, you could play it and get a little mill trigger, but yeah, this could do a lot of fun things. I actually really, really like this design and just the creativity and, again, the versatility. Gokun, why do you hate it? Grief said he liked it.
Yeah, I picked this card because I hate it. Not to say hate. I think
you just did.
It's very well designed. I do dislike the trend of cards that sit in your hand to sit in your hand. And maybe this is one of those elements where, since it's a digital card game, we need to sort of open more space and open ourselves up to like continuing to explore the things that only a digital card game can do, like moving around and shuffling up and focusing very much on like these sort of like solitaire decks that take the focus away from the board. But for me, this is a sort of exemplar of a design that feels good to play with, but is so uninteractable that it's difficult to defend, in my opinion. Which is to say that I understand that Grief really likes it, and that there is a portion of the card game community that, of course, likes it. I'm just looking at this as something that could have maybe been something different. Like self-mill, self-discard are super strong, and they all sort of focus on the movement of cards from zone to zone. But I mean, why are we focusing specifically on the movement, which restricts us to, say, like having mill, having discard, having all this, when we can have cards that for example, stay in the graveyard and then can be used from the graveyard. Maybe this is a UI thing that will come later
Walnock's
into a bit
theme
future.
is movement. And yeah, we have a problem with not having an enchantment type and all these static effects working from zones that they shouldn't is a big burden on memory. But Walnock's theme is card movement. And that's part of why you see a lot of this, particularly coming from Walnock. And I think there are a couple designers whose theme is card movement who really, really like exploring these themes.
Yeah, I see the openness here, but I think that if we had more room to work with non-unit card types and activations from zones that aren't the battlefield, like we would be seeing something. I just said the battlefield, so it's obvious I'm coming from a very strong like Magic background here, which is very much informing my opinion.
The thing is though, like you mentioned, working from zones like deck or hand or graveyard and having cards static in them to work off of effects is tried, was even posted from Walnut or other realms for collective, but people don't like them. Even the discussion of having cards in the graveyard and triggering was vehemently fought against. Why? Because people didn't care about those cards because interacting with them wasn't in the card collection before. And even to this day, it is very, very hard to find very good interactions for specific cards in specific zones or specific interactions. Now our graveyard hate is in the game, so people are more or less moving into, well, doing stuff from graveyard. Even just recently we got the card that has rebound on it, and when the card finally is in the graveyard, it deals 1 damage to each player, which is a very mild attempt at trying out these waters. People just hate exploring card designs that they are not comfortable with or don't like. This is not to hit against your point just right now, but that's the common complaint, quote unquote excuse, why we're not moving forward. Because even right now in collective, we've barely tested the waters. There's so much we can do. Not even the card movement aspect of Walnut has been explored to its fullest, because either UI issues, tracking issues, so on and so forth. There were even archetypes suggested that work off the bottom of your deck. And people didn't like it because, well, we don't have cards that sort cards onto the bottom of the deck. That's why we designed those.
Maybe the big issue that I'm having is that for me, this does feel like more of the same. And I would like to see the community keep on moving and like pushing at weirder.
I can see that argument. I definitely can buy into that argument. Okay. A lot of people compared this to Jokester because very much resembles Jokester in a couple of respects.
I even said that, yeah. It's basically Jokester for hand.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to stop the share. This was a fun episode. We probably ran a little bit long. I'm sorry, guys. I had a lot of fun.
8 minutes.
It's all right. We could see
8 minutes relative to what? We
end.
always change the runtime. Great. Thank you very much for being on the show, as always.
Always love to be here.
Yeah. I miss Empty. Hopefully we'll have Empty back next week. And Gokun, it was so great to finally have you on. I am so glad you finally agreed to come join us.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. This was really fun.
Yeah. Okay, so like, comment, and subscribe to remind me why I keep doing this show. If you're interested in seeing a special episode on VQGAN, it would probably just be me flying solo talking AI. Let me know via Discord or comment on the video. Keep on playing collective and keep on voting on cards. Bye.
See you.